The way we are consuming content is changing by the day, but what does this ever-revolving landscape mean for the future of media and the entertainment world as a whole? Joining us here at the New York Stock Exchange to break it all down is Seth Schachner. He is the managing director at Strat America, a consulting firm which works with media and technology clients. General man about town, appreciate you being here. Thanks a lot. Yeah, let's get into it about YouTube specifically, because we are so far beyond the era of traditional cable news and being dialed in. We're a generation of cord cutters. We're going to new distribution outlets, and YouTube really seems to have established really dominant market share in terms of live TV and so many other offerings. What do you see there with that product?
It's, they're calling it king of all media now, and it's an interesting thing for me. It's outpacing, traditional linear TV and streaming in these days, and it's aggregating tons of stuff, from sports to short form and user-generated content. I've watched it from something that was initially what we call a UGC, a user gen vehicle, that brought lots of stuff. I come from the music industry originally, lots of stuff that we didn't even know was in our catalogs that millions of people were watching. And it's evolved into something that's kind of sitting between traditional media and new media. And I think it's probably in a primo position to capitalize that, particularly as pay TV continues to decline, basically. But I think a little bit underrepresented. There's a lot of potential there for it. Do
you feel like it's worth it for people? They always consider, okay, do I pay a little bit more to be able to skip through ads? And that's the big one, right? I feel like that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the big fight, the negotiation between the distributors and the consumers. Are you willing to pay a little bit more to skip those ads, or are you okay to wait 30 seconds, 60 seconds and sit through them?
Well, they're in a really unique position because, putting aside what the analysts think about the under potential of the advertising, they can always go higher on the ad business. I mean, it's Google. It's one of the very biggest advertising machines there is in the globe. So you're starting out from that perspective very, very strong. But subscription business is an increasingly big part of their business. To me, when I look at digital businesses, you got to have a couple of engines, and I see subscription as being, a much bigger part of the business, particularly if they're picking up things like, the NFL, or if you're going to start seeing other types of content landing in there. So it's a really good story for sure.
In the history of television, we've always talked about what's called the key advertising demo, those younger, more impressionable viewers, and perhaps you can establish a brand relationship with them early on, with the hope from the brand perspective that relationship continues for the rest of their consuming life. Where is that advertising demo leaning towards today?
It's interesting. They are so big and broad and multi-platform and successful, so I totally agree with you on the younger ones, particularly the ones that follow Mr. Beast and all the influencers we'll talk about. But there's this whole phenomenon with connected TVs. I'm sure you got one sitting in your house, and it's probably one of the first things you're clicking on when you go onto the connected, whether it's the Samsung channels or not. And they're seeing a lot of growth from the connected TV, and that's older, actually. That's not the younger kids. So they got a lot of stuff all across the board to compete with Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those influencers. You mentioned Mr. Beast. Who are the other kind of top names that are establishing their own market share? What are they doing so well and so uniquely or inventively in the space? Because trying to see where the puck is going for media distribution seems like an impossible task, but some influencers are clearly doing it really well.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not in the demo. That's probably the expert on influencers with the younger kids, but Charli D'Amelio, Addison Rae, even the older skewing stuff. I mean, the Kardashians are influencers. Taylor Swift's an influencer. And I think what's really interesting there is strategically, these are things that are becoming their own businesses now. And they need less and less of the middleman, folks coming from places like I've worked, like a Sony or studios. They can kind of do it on their own. And that's brands, premium partnerships, fan clubs. So I think that's a really important factor that I think YouTube is a big beneficiary, but I think smart media companies now can kind of incorporate that with streaming services as well, who we're not talking about today, but they're an important part of the vehicle, the overall success of the media business as well.
Is there such a thing as influencer fatigue, I wonder, and at what point do we cross over that mark where people say, all right, I've seen enough of this. Every time I open up my screen, I'm seeing the same faces promote different products. What does that look like?
I mean, I would bet Hollywood's hoping for that, because I think a lot of the influencer stuff is really starting to shift away. For the Gen Z stuff that you're starting to see now, they care less and less about traditional Hollywood content. Charli D'Amelio is going to mean a lot more Mr. Beast than Brad Pitt is to someone who's in that age demographic.
Wow.
And so, I think it's going to keep shifting personally, and I think we're seeing that. We talk a little about Minecraft, but you're seeing what happens when Hollywood starts to hit on that potential interest from Gen Z. They get these explosively successful things that come out like Minecraft. So definitely the center of gravity is changing for sure.